I would like to introduce you to my mother and father, who I love very dearly. I know my brother and sister would concur. I've done many tapes of my mother and family, but unfortunately I did not have this VCR when Daddy was with us. Although I took many talking tapes, and he wrote his memoirs. I gave him a tape recorder, and he spent many years writing his memoirs. Unfortunately, I never got him on film. So I thought maybe I would do a little something different, and I know he would have loved it. People talk about him and give you their impressions of what he was like, because he really was an exceptional man in many ways. And so this evening, Herbert Shapiro and Ruth Shapiro, my father's cousins, who knew him very well over a long period of time, are coming over, and they will, in their own way, describe Daddy and give us some of their who made an effort this evening to come over and join us and be part of this little episode we're doing for Daddy. So Herbert, introduce yourself.
We are Ruth and Herbert Shapiro, and I assure you it was no effort. It was a pleasure to be here tonight.
Well, only that you had to park the car across the street, according to my mother, and then come up, and she thought it was too much of an effort, but you made it seem so easy.
It is easy. As Ruth said, we parked the car.
You parked the car.
I am a first cousin once removed of Charlie Shapiro. Charlie's father and my father's father were brothers. Charlie's mother and my father's mother were sisters, so it was Charlie and my dad were double first cousins.
Isn't that interesting?
Charlie's father...
That's why you look a little bit like him, Herbert.
Double.
Right.
Charlie's father, whom we call Fetty Yisrael, was a brother of William Shapiro, Solomon Shapiro, my grandfather Chaim Sholem Shapiro, and another brother named Abram Shapiro. And there were sisters were Basha, Minda, and Chaya. And I met all three sisters. Chaya I met in Palestine in 1931, and I met Basha and Minda in Kovna, and outside of Kovna, also in 1931.
That's interesting. What were you doing in Palestine in 1931?
I had a teaching fellowship under the Institute of International Education, and I taught in France for a whole year.
Isn't that interesting? What field? What was it? Was it law?
Conversational English.
Oh.
To the senior students of the French Lycée, in Lycée du Puy, dans Loire, in France. And I caught a very bad cold. And the doctors there said that I needed a warm climate to overcome the sinusitis, as they call it, the sinusite. My aunt had just moved to Palestine, and I checked with the folks that by all means visit Aunt Chaya. So I went to visit my aunt in Palestine.
Can I ask you something very interesting that I've always wanted to know? Uncle Solomon did something in Israel, in Palestine at the time, something with Hebrew University. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I'm very familiar with that, because when I was in Palestine in 1931, I was asked to meet with the officials of the Hebrew University to designate or to select a fitting memorial for Solomon and Dora Shapiro. And I met Dr. Judah Magnus. The president was not in Palestine at the time, but I met with his associate, a Professor Lieberman.
And what had Uncle Solomon done?
He had left a very large bequest for the Hebrew University in his will.
I see.
And as a result of that bequest, the Albert Einstein Institute of Mathematics was established at the Hebrew University in their memory.
Is there any kind of a plaque or anything that any of us could ever find? Or children, grandchildren may someday want to just see, you know, their legacy, what Uncle Solomon did in Israel?
Interestingly enough, Ruth and I visited Israel in 1967, just a couple of weeks after the Six-Day War. And we visited Mount Scopus. We went through minefields unknowingly.
Yeah.
But we got to Mount Scopus and we visited the building, the Einstein Institute of Mathematics, which had been dedicated in their memory. And that was a complete shambles at the time. The windows were out. It was in a very desolate condition. And subsequently, the Hebrew University has rededicated a building known as the Einstein Institute of Mathematics, and there is a small plaque. It has been substituted, but there is a small plaque stating that that building originally was called the Einstein Institute of Mathematics at Dora and Solomon Shapiro Einstein Institute of Mathematics.
Well, now you've answered a question I'd have to use. I always remember Daddy mentioning something about it, and, I was too young to really ask questions, and it would be, wonderful. I know that they established the Dora, the Deborah home for the consumptives, and they brought the family over. I'm sure your father came over as a result of their efforts too, didn't he not? Did he not?
I do not know whether a result of their efforts, but one thing Solomon Shapiro did do, and one thing your father did. One thing your father did was they were very, very close family-minded.
Yeah, and very generous in helping.
Very generous, and if they could help anybody in the family, they did so.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I can remember in my own childhood having my father give away my bedroom set to somebody who just happened to come, who he put in business, in the rag business, and the poor guy didn't have any place for his children to sleep, and so that night I ended up in Dorothy's room because my furniture had been moved out. So that's the kind of a life we lived when we were kids, always knowing that somebody was going to be helped, or, by Mother and Dad, actually. So now, Ruth, what have you got to add to this discussion? I just want to give you an opportunity, and then we'll go back to Herbert.
Well, it's been my pleasure to get to know Mother and Dad the way that we did get to know them. We enjoyed every minute we ever spent with them. It was always a treat to be with them. And I always felt that so many in the family learned so many wonderful things from Mother and Dad.
Do you remember when you first met them? Because my mother does. She was just mentioning it today.
Yes, we came to Havana and we stayed with Mother and Dad, and they were just wonderful hosts and hostess. And we made many, many wonderful trips to Havana, and Havana means Wilbur and Charlie.
That's very lovely. So Herbert, what do you remember Daddy, as when you were a youngster? I'm sure Daddy was a few years older than you were. Not too many, but you would certainly know him before I did. Do you remember him as a young man?
Yes, way back when, and I used to work with my dad when I went to my senior year in high school and through college and law school. Your dad was a very, very hard-working individual. He wanted excellence in everything that he did. And he worked hard, he devoted himself and dedicated himself to his business and to his family. And he was always on the go, always looking for something new, always trying to educate himself further and further and further. And I do not know if you know this, but we knew that during the 1950s, Dad had a French tutor in French in Havana.
Yes.
And later when they came to the United States in 59 or 59,
61 actually. They stayed 2 years. You came in 61.
And Dad went to Lindsay Hopkins School here and took French and also philosophy courses.
And who do you think drove him to and from? My mother.
Mother drove him to and from, and Mother used to wait for him outside.
That's right.
He was the oldest pupil there.
He was really a fantastic individual.
They liked him so much. He used to tell me about all the other students, and they'd sit around having a bite of lunch. And I always thought of my mother trying to find something to do. There was luckily a Sears Roebuck nearby. So she used to spend some time doing a little shopping.
And Dad would love to help people get started in business.
Oh, yeah.
And he would bring folks home for dinner. Mother could tell you better than I. He'd bring folks home for dinner unannounced and say, meet so-and-so. And Dad would go back years and years and years when he first met this individual whom he was bringing home, whom he had brought home.
Can I just give, just for 1 second, I'm going to shift over and Mother, he made mistakes. And after all, you were the one
Yeah, I'm going to go to Hollywood.
that was so patient with Daddy, because I can remember not even a phone call, and they'd show up. And then you'd have to go wrestling around and getting dinner together or lunch or whatever it was. You remember that, Mom?
Yeah, I do remember. But it was fun. It was nice. We enjoyed it. We always liked an open house.
Well, you did that very
Everybody
gracefully.
was welcome.
You did that very gracefully.